I'm Philip Neely with Dunaway Associates. Jennifer Meldy, she really is running the team day to day, so she's the key. And then Tim's over here, our note taker, Tim Hare, also is part of our team. All three of us are landscape architects, which means we have a great interest and passion for designing outdoor things, and Parks and Rec is a huge part of our body of work, what we do. So for me, it's been almost exclusively all I've done throughout my career. So getting to interact with you about your park system will help us begin to get a feel for the topics relative to the total park system. So what I'd like to do is walk you through the process that the city has retained our team to do, where we go through a series of steps to create an overall update to your park system master plan. And then the city can use this document and the priorities for future improvements, updating parks, new trails, new spray grounds, updating a playground, pavilions, whatever. But our focus is to go through this process to help create priorities for the next 5, 6, 8, 10 years. And it's kind of fascinating interacting with you as a community, as citizens, others. When we go through a survey instrument, the things that will come up are kind of fascinating. Years later, people can look back and go, those items came right out of the kind of the vision of some items in our master plan. So it is important, and we appreciate you being with us. Let me walk through our process. Again, we're just going to go through this process about 5 to 7 months, 8 months roughly. And then we're going to ask you, if you will, to share with us in a roundtable kind of conversation. You may have some particular categories of great interest to you. So when we begin to wind this up, we're just going to go right next door and we can interact more one-on-one with you. So feel free to hold your thoughts. And again, we're not going to film you. You don't have to worry about being on video or anything like that. We just want to hear from you. Here's our process. I'll try to go fairly efficient on this. When we do a system-wide park and open space master plan, it's usually 2 big phases. What you have in your current system in terms of parks, both outdoor, indoor resources, what's available in other resources in the community, and then we like to go through these kinds of public meetings and a citizen survey where we get quantifiable data on needs within the entire community of San Angelo. Trends happen and things could be occurring out there that citizens are beginning to want to see eventually added or updated into parks. But we have to go through a survey instrument to begin to get some area of quantification to that. Otherwise, things can just move all over. But this will help prioritize that. So the first phase is really understanding your current park system and beginning to get quantifiable needs expressed from the community. Then in phase 2, we really begin to build the master plan. It's an overall document, but it has particular priorities, and I'll touch on those here in a minute. So phase 1, these are the steps we would go through in a phase 1, and we're currently in phase 1, as you might expect. We've been able to work with the city on getting mapping. We've got a big map in the back of the room, and it's really the base layer. It shows the whole city. It shows where the parks are, and it shows some other key destinations. But you begin to see where are your resources for the park system, and we will build on top of that with other mapping in the coming months. But then in the inventory phase, I'd said this earlier to the park board, Carl and the team here at the city has provided us tremendous inventory of your current park system in terms of site by site, both the resources that are available in the parks and photography of the different resources. So we use that as a baseline of understanding your total offerings today. So we have park and rec facilities. We're beginning to understand a little bit more of the joint use facilities, like what the school district may have, that the city and the school district work together. Those are key partnerships. We'll look at some of the athletic associations and what sport groups are using today. What are their trends? Are they growing? Are they flat? We'll look at other programs, which would be classes, whether it be youth or young adults or seniors, whatever programs. And then we'll look at other offerings, other opportunities in the community that are available in Park and Rec. Sometimes you just don't need to duplicate what's going on out there. And so that can come up when you look at total offerings within a city or within a region. Programs. Meaning, what do people sign up for? Obviously, people sign up for softball, baseball, but they sign up for classes. They sign up for taekwondo, things like that. So we will look at recreational programs. Again, Carl and the team, city staff will provide that to us, and that way we can take a kind of an overview of what programs are happening in the community today and what recommendations. There may be areas in the Park and Rec offerings that could be increased, that you could take a bigger step in offering to the public. There may be areas that you ought to downsize because there's other providers in the community. And that just depends. Community by community have different trends or different needs. So we'll look at that. Public input, just like right now. This evening, we'll do this again tomorrow. We have the opportunity to interact with you and begin to get some categories or topics from you that can help us as we're going to work towards a survey. But the stakeholder type conversations, again, you probably have some strong focus areas that you'd like to talk to us. Public meetings, the board meeting we had, and then we will take from this and work with city staff on a survey instrument that they're going to put together. It'll probably go out towards the end of this month or the beginning of November. The survey instrument would then be a way to get feedback from families and young people, et cetera. What are the needs or expressed needs within the park system? And by doing it, we're able to get a sampling that's based upon quantifiable data, and we can understand how interested are people in pavilions, trails, spray grounds, soccer fields. And so that's the advantage of being able to take your feedback and then implement that in a survey instrument. And that'll probably be open to the public for 3 or 4 weeks during the month of November. But you really have to have that kind of input to develop clear priorities. So that's a very, very quick overview of phase one, where we do the inventory, we understand the programs, we understand what are the other offerings, and then we begin to hone in on public input and eventually a survey instrument, which will be really foundational to how we go forward in phase two. Phase two is where the plan begins to come together. Priorities. This is foundational to why you even go through a process of a master plan. You need to know community-wide, what are your needs? Do you need to reinvest in things today that are just beyond their life cycle? Do you need new features within existing parks? Do you need to add new things in the park system that you partner with? Do you need to take advantage of opportunities with the school district to share resources? All of those things begin to be the way to look at priorities. So the priorities, as you're seeing, is a sample. That's all this is on the right up there, is a sample. It was showing from another community how we summarized high needs versus moderate needs versus low needs. And typically what we do is we take from the survey, that's the number one rated or percentage of input. We use that, and then we add to it other types of input, and we put it through a scoring matrix. And that way we're able to let staff or Dunaway or Park Board or whoever it is, we're able to do our own individual rankings, and then we run that through a scoring matrix. And it puts a quantifiable data outcome to it. And so the survey will definitely be the number one. It always should be, because it really taps into the community. And then the priorities will begin to become more clear. It will lead to an action plan where you know what you want, and then you begin to think about where that would occur. So let's just say that the top 2 or 3 priorities are trails, pavilions, and a spray ground. I'm going to use that as a... Then we begin to think about where would those needs begin to occur, how would those be funded, and what timeline. Is that an item that's 2 years out or 4 years out? Some items on a priority list can happen more quickly. They're less costly. You could partner, you could get a grant. But we will look at that, and so the action plan will begin to look at your community as a whole, just like that map back there, and identify where these types of improvements could occur. And so that can be your city leaders and the citizens as a whole could see that and understand what's coming 2, 4, 6 years from now. The implementation plan is the cost side of that. There has to be, on our part, a real careful consideration of what you're funding, yours or other funds that could be added to it, what is realistic, so that the action plan has realistic goals to it. And the implementation lets us look at different funding sources different departments within the city that could also share resources to make things happen, or partnerships or sponsors, other dollars that could be added, grants. So you have your action item list, high, moderate, and low, but then you have to have a reality of how that gets funded. And so we'll look at that, and that becomes a really working playbook, if you will, that staff and city leaders can use every year to build their list of priorities, capital improvements or general fund items. Hopefully that makes sense. It just really gives you targeted areas for improvement. Here's a sample. Don't try to study this in a lot of detail, but this is an action plan or an implementation where the park need, the ranking of a need is at the far left, and then it begins to think about budget ranges, and the gray categories are where these parks occur in that community, and the green matrix over on the far right, those are the various funding sources that could be tapped into to make that happen. Playgrounds and trails have various funding sources that potentially can help those. Sometimes a playground is a donor item, or an HOA contributes to a new playground. So we'll look at that as a part of building the action plan in more detail. And then we take the process, the overall findings, the results of the priorities, the action plan, all that begins to come into one summary document. It's a document, hopefully it's a lively, active document that city leaders are using in planning and implementing new pieces within the park system, partnerships and other types of funding opportunities that may come up. So we put that into a preliminary draft, it'll go through review, and eventually it goes through final approval. Typically, a city council will pass a resolution that your master plan is approved. It becomes a working document, and that way it can be on file with Texas Parks and Wildlife if you want to go after grants one day with the state. So those are the two steps, but from the inventory and needs assessment to building the park master plan. Now, what we'd like to do here briefly, when I wrap up this, is we're going to ask you to just go across the hall, and there may be one or two categories that you're going to see me touch on that are of great interest to you, or people that you represent. And so that group or that table we're going to ask you to go to, just share your thoughts with us, just like we're sitting here casually having a conversation. But these are 6 categories that typically embrace everything a park system has in it, whether it be a city your size or smaller or even bigger. These are the 6 categories: athletics and sports. Second is aquatics. Third is trails and nature areas. Fourth is civic events and special use facilities. Fifth is indoor activities. And then sixth are outdoor, or what I call classic park type features. Let me just touch on these, because these will probably trigger ideas or things that you may already have on your mind. Sports. You already have various sports offerings and fields, areas, a major complex. You know, none of these pictures you're going to see are in your community. These are simply places out there that represent these categories. Sports continues to be popular throughout the Southwest United States because of our weather, and just because boys and girls, youth play different types of sports, diamond sports, field sports. So you have a whole range of demand. Some communities in Texas are playing year-round. They literally never let their soccer fields or rest. They're able to play year-round. So it's a high demand. You're talking about competitive play. You're also talking about, again, mixed, different age brackets, the boys, the girls, and sometimes you're talking about tournament events that are brought in that are revenue potential for a community. So sports and athletics is huge in communities. So if that's something of interest to you tonight, just please come into that table and share some thoughts. Second category, aquatics. I had said to the board, the park board earlier, this is a major area within park and rec systems that has evolved rapidly. From the lap pool, the old diving well, the old just rectangle pool, to incredible dynamic aquatic pieces today that you're seeing all over the country. Some big, some small, some in between, but aquatics is huge in terms of success stories. So you're talking about bigger family aquatic type resources where these can be revenue generating. They could be outdoor, they could be indoor, or a combination thereof. Again, these are happening in different scales throughout Texas and the Southwest. But you also see the popularity of what we call spray grounds or splash pads, where it becomes, again, these are like a playground that's wet, that there's opportunity for kids, and kids, we're going to use that loosely, right? Any age. Yes, I'd love to go into them too. Where they're places that have really create a destination, as well as for families, groups, birthday parties, family reunions, etc. They're typically free, but they're very popular, and sometimes these are great sponsorship or donor areas where a company or some sort of a private enterprise would be willing to contribute to the capital cost or the O&M, operations and maintenance. I need to clarify that. I didn't clarify that earlier. So spray grounds, really a key part of today's aquatic movement. Trails and nature areas. Generally speaking, in the United States, trails are the most funded part of a park system day in, day out. More capital projects deal with trail. They're popular throughout the country because every age bracket loves them. Hard trails, soft trails, along rivers, urban environments, they're hugely successful, but trails and nature areas particularly have grown in popularity, where people can get outings. You have these kinds of locations because of your natural resources, but big, long, multi-mile trail networks, soft trails like on the bottom right, or even trails that connect to neighborhood parks like you see on the top right. Trails are very, very popular. And then you have the component of outdoor learning, nature immersion, where young people or families, and so even sometimes schools are working with their fourth graders or sixth graders on their natural sciences courses where kids actually have scheduled field trips and they do outdoor learning. So these can become a part of a trail system and or nature areas along the way. Category 4, civic events, special use areas. If this is important to you or you have some thoughts, certainly share these with us. Meaning where people would go for big events, smaller events, very specialized kind of festivals. Movies in the park have become very popular. Community gardens, large ones, even down to neighborhood size, farmers markets, amphitheaters. These all are very specialized, but they have a civic activity to them. You can say they're less about recreation, they're about togetherness, community, but they are a part of the civic experience. Some of the trendy stuff that's happened now for several years would be dog parks, skate parks on the bottom left, and then disc golf continues to be very popular. And again, these could be items tonight that you would want to talk to us about. Indoor recreation, wow, that's a huge category in and of itself. But indoor recreation oftentimes are the most expensive, but they have opportunities for you to partner or joint venture with schools, colleges, other providers out there, churches that have resources. So you're talking about indoor recreation that can include swimming or therapy pools, climbing walls, obviously gymnasiums, meeting rooms, tracks, etc. Anything goes. There's some rec centers today being built in the United States well over 100,000 square feet, which is mind-boggling, some of the resources. But they're there, a lot of times their cost recovery of those facilities is 100% from day one. If that makes sense. They pay for themselves as they go. So indoor recreation might be a big category you would want to talk about, which includes then specialized pieces within it, again, where certain classes or certain physical training, fitness, things like that. Those can have sponsors for simply that area within a rec center. And lastly, outdoor park facilities, which is kind of everything else that happens in a park system. Pavilions, one of my favorite categories is pavilions, just because they're so successful in terms of the cost benefit for what it costs to put a pavilion in and what the community benefits from it. It's amazing. For groups, again, for large outings, for birthdays, etc. And they can come in very catalog pavilions. It makes them really neat with it, that are more economical. Or they can be custom pavilions that brand your district or your city as a whole or a part of the community. You have some pretty neat pavilions already, but pavilions are always popular, even small ones along trails, like you see in the bottom right. Playgrounds in every form and color and shape you can imagine today. The playground manufacturing just continues to push the envelope with different types of play experiences that kids have, shaded areas, as well as more nature play type features. So those are very popular. And then other areas, again, this is just classic outdoor park facilities, basketball, pickleball on the bottom left, therapy areas or workout areas. Sand volleyball continues to be very popular. It's not real costly, but it's very popular. And even little trendy stuff like the hammocks you see in the top right. Sometimes in civic spaces, these are becoming kind of a cool piece that communities are adding, whether they put the hammocks out there and then take them up at night, or if the community brings their own hammocks. It's just a fun socialization thing that's happening in park systems. Okay, I know I'm moving quickly here. So that was phase one, phase two, what we're doing, and these are the categories that I just walked you through, the 6 categories. So tonight, thank you again for being with us. Please just stay with us and go across the hall, and we'll just work in small tables. We'll try to capture anything that you share with us. We will take from your input and the input we get tomorrow, and we will help work with city staff on fine-tuning a survey instrument, because the survey instrument allows us to put that out to the public at large and get feedback. And that'll probably, as I said, happen during the month of November. We will summarize and extract from the survey key priorities. Then we will also have some other rankings that go with that I had talked about. And then that will really push us into phase 2, which is the action plan and implementation plan. Okay, if you have just a quick question before we break, fine, but we don't want to get into long dialogue. We'd rather save that so we can write that down next door. But anybody have any questions about our process, something we're going to be doing or that you want more clarity on? Feel free just to. Everybody clear what we're doing? Okay, so let's just kind of wind down here. We'll work our way right next door, and then we'll have those different tables that feel free. You can go to all 6 of them if you want, or if you can come to one or two of them. Thank you.